In this video, I'm going to have an addendum to my Balkan Wars videos. And one of the things I wanted to comment to that I really liked about Joe Miranda's games in the 1990s, particularly the ones in Strategy and Tactics magazine, is that it allowed him to experiment with a lot of his ideas, but because of the magazine format, which made them presentable, you know, there's a limitation to the size of the rule book. And so if you want to get the full scope of some of these games, he was able to provide what would be termed optional rules. And sometimes these appeared in, Moves magazine initially, or in Fire in Movement later. So, for example, with the Balkan Wars from S&T 164, in Moves number 81, we find that there is a feature article called the Balkan Wars Analysis and Optional Rules. So it's the cover article, and this is written by Joe Miranda, and it gives you some insight into his design thoughts, as well as some of the optional rules that really wouldn't have been able to fit in the magazine format, but they will be provided here and can be added if you wish. So one of the things that highlights in this article here is the influence that S&T 154, which is also a Joe Miranda design, which I also like this game a lot. It's called the Russo-Turkish War, 1877-1878. Which was a very innovative game, I thought, and I enjoyed it. But some of this game he is a result of what he learned and developed for the Russo-Turkish War game. And one of the things that he came up with in Balkan Wars is the cadre factor. So instead of just rating a unit's strength based on the firepower and based on the size and the type of weapons it had, there is a cadre factor, which is the middle number that's presented on the counter. And that factor represents training and leadership, which is different within the different nationalities, but also within the different units. And so some units were more elite or trained, others were more green. And this factor is used in the Balkan Wars game to provide die roll modifiers when they're compared and sussed out with who you're fighting against. So if you're attacking and you're using charge, you can get a die roll modifier if you have a good unit that has a good cadre rating. And also when you're rallying, it stands to reason your better trained troops with better leadership would rally more easily, so you have a die roll modifier there. Another rule in the game that he explains is the infiltration rule, which is related to the headquarters being present and its command range. And I'll just read a section from this article where he said, quote, "As for tactics, use the special headquarters rule to infiltrate your units through the enemy line. The way the rule works, units which are within command range of a friendly headquarters may move through enemy zones of control with an extra movement point cost. This is useful for cutting off enemy supply and routes of retreat." While the infiltration rule might at first appear to be somewhat ahead of its time, being more evocative of 1918 than 1912 and 1913, remember the scale of the game. Each hex is 15 kilometers across. This was too much terrain for the units of this period to cover with their limited mobility and primitive communications. A force could easily exploit such a gap in this era. The real problem was not so much outmaneuvering enemy forces, but having a command structure which could recognize that such a gap existed and then get the troops moved into position. This rule will only be useful in certain specialized circumstances, mainly when a player has gotten his headquarters into position facing a relatively weakly held portion of the enemy line. So that is an interesting rule. And he adds a comment about this further in the next paragraph. The infiltration rule, incidentally, will be one to watch as the system develops. One of the problems in this era was maintaining command and control of units. Once units advanced into enemy territory, command and control links quickly broke down as units got beyond friendly telegraph lines. One of the major revolutions in the First World War was the improvement in command control. This was partly through the use of technical means, such as wireless radio and liaison aircraft. But it was also improved leadership. By 1918, the Germans and certain Allied armies were giving their lower level commanders more flexibility and initiative, allowing their units to exploit gaps in the enemy line and to keep on going, thus restoring mobility. The older, more rigid command system was abandoned. In its place, lower level leaders were given mission objectives and then allowed to use their initiative to fight their way through. Since they no longer had to go through the time-consuming process referring all matters back to their higher headquarters, units could now exploit opportunities as they arose. So that's what you get with some of Joe Miranda's design notes on this game. And I didn't comment in the replay about how infiltration works because I really didn't use it very often. Also, the second part of the article are optional rules. So one interesting optional rule here is a little bit more detailed, expanded sequence of play. So in addition to the diplomacy phase, when you get to the first player turn, you have mobilization, then strategic operations, then movement, then offensive bombardment, then defensive bombardment, then combat, and then rally. And then you do the same thing with the second player's turn. So those are a little bit more detailed and a little bit more emphasis in there on the strategic operations, but also the strategic operations involve intelligence operations and secret operations that the optional rules bring in. Also the offensive bombardment and then the defensive bombardment with artillery and fleet units. So that's really a very nice addition to the game. It doesn't make it too much more complicated, but it is exciting. There is also an optional rule for the weather, and the weather is based on whether it's summer turns or winter turns, and then you roll a die to determine what the weather effect is for that game turn, which, if you remember from the replay, it is a week long. And so the weather primarily is going to affect movement ability and through different types of terrain. Also, there is a rule for headquarters and strategic intelligence. So with this new strategic operations phase, there can be a strategic intelligence check by using the headquarters rating. So these are things that can be done in the optional rules. There's also some optional rules that give cavalry a little bit more flavor because in the game they're very weak units, 1 strength point. They can move quickly though, but they can do reconnaissance in the optional rules. So if you remember, the game is got hidden information because even though I didn't play it this way because I was soloing and I was taking a lot of pictures for the benefit of the video, normally the units would be inverted with just their flag showing, and it could be a strong unit or a very, very weak unit. So recon can help open up what are those units. So that gives cavalry a little bit more value if you use that rule. There's also a rule for cavalry screening. So you can stick your cavalry units up there and they're not automatically going to be just speed bumps that get blown away, but they can maybe retreat before combat if they're in screening operations. There's also an alternative combat results table that is provided in Moves 81. And one of the reasons this came up is due to the The charge rule in the original game in S&T magazine is very powerful, and it doesn't cost you that much to use it, so you pretty much want to use it all the time. And this makes it a little bit more costly on this alternative table so that you're not automatically going to use charge. So that is included in here. There's also a bombardment table for the bombardment segments if you choose to add those into your sequence of play. And there is also a secret operations table that's provided for the secret operations in the strategic phase, and there's a number of operations that have been added that are nuanced. There is espionage, there are propaganda activities, there is assassination, subversion, and counterintelligence. So to perform these, you have to use agents, and so the rules, the optional rules, provide a number of agents for the different parties that are involved. Some are more dedicated to having the ability to use agents in this theater as others, so it's a little bit asymmetrical. Also, Miranda provided some additional scenarios, a mini scenario of 6 games called On to Belgrade. There's a 4th scenario called Jihad, which is an Ottoman fantasy scenario, which is something that I probably would never play. But anyway, I think this, if you like Balkan Wars, this issue of Moves number 81 is a good one to get for those articles. And, you know, I wanted to comment on something else. There's another article in this that's not related to the Balkan Wars, but since I have this out already, I did want to comment to it. And because this is another Joe Miranda game that I like, that he provided support for. It's from S&T 147 called Holy War, Afghanistan. And this article takes a look at operational combat results table results. So there's a alternative combat results table for the game here if you want to try this. And it has an example of the new procedure. So you have an alternative conventional combat results table, and you have an alternative guerrilla combat table. And that is one of the interesting things in Holy War Afghanistan. I hope to do a look at that game sometime in the future. It was another, I think, a home run by Joe Miranda back from the, the 90s. So anyway, that's what I had to say about the Balkan Wars and some extra support that you can get from Moves 81. And I thank you for watching this video, and please stay tuned if you'd like to see hear me talk about more games. Have a great day.